Let's chat. So, good morning, Jesse. Thanks for joining this morning. I really appreciate that, and the chance to speak with you about your progress in the lawsuits is really important. So, for people as they join, and they will shortly be joining, I'm sure. We'll try and keep the questions mainly focused to the lawsuit, and we'll perhaps take some other questions as we want. Okay. So I was just saying, Jesse. So originally, just a couple of days ago, you mentioned having this live stream again this morning, and to talk about some of the developments as you saw them. What do you think have been the main sort of developments this week from state? Obviously, you've filed, but other developments as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of us lawyers who sit in the position of having worked through diversity visa litigation for the last 2 years, we're still dealing with, the Gomez class action that I'm class counsel on, and we're raising this year's lawsuit, which is different. But yet what we see from the Gomez, from the government attorneys is, State Department has really taken the mindset that they are untouchable. That doesn't mean they're going to harm all diversity visa applicants for this year or for next year. It just means that they do not see a way in which courts can get in their business, and it's their business, and they're untouchable. And it's really stems from a unique perspective that consulates and the State Department has always had, which is their actions, their discretion is unreviewable, and who says otherwise is the enemy. Now, specifically, though, they're taking, and this was never their position, even under Trump, but they're now saying that all immigrant visa processing is a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
And although Congress allocates hundreds of thousands of visas for basically 3 buckets: immigrant visas, family-based, employment-based, and diversity visas, and sets the limits and numbers and allocations, that it's a zero-sum game. So if one goes in, someone has to go out. No, that's false. The other thing they're saying is Congress actually said in a policy statement that they're required to prioritize immediate relative and fiance visas ahead of diversity visa and other immigrant visa categories. And they're getting that from this statement in law back in 2003, in which the Congress said, you should really get to immigrant visa for immediate relatives and fiancés in 60 days. Now, that completely...
That's it.
That's it, right? But it totally ignores the unique item for diversity visas, which Congress said you have to do 55. You not have to. You should be able to do 55,000, and here's a deadline. And as Judge Mehta said and has recognized repeatedly, that really sets an immediacy upon the department.
Yeah.
And so for you to ignore that, right?
Yeah.
That you're not doing your job. And so this kind of misreading of the statute is dangerous. It really is. And I wish it were other, but it really is.
Yeah. Saying you should really get to that within 60 days that's a subtle hint. That's a push, but it's not the same as having a program which runs between, defined periods in time and lights out on September 30th of the year. That's a program which is designed around expedience, and the Congress didn't say you can issue up to 55,000 if you feel like it. They said, here's a program, you're going to issue 55,000 visas. To me, it's as a normal part of the immigration budget, if you want to put it that way, the million a year or 1.2 million a year or whatever, as any other part of the program. There's no reason why they shouldn't meet it.
I think if this were ever to go to Supreme Court or an appellate argument and they were asked this question by a justice, which I would ask the government, is if there were a a reason that you came up with, could you issue 3,000 diversity visas in an entire year? They would say yes. Could you do zero? They would say yes.
Yeah.
They would say yes, and that's their position. So, again, I don't say this to make the audience afraid or scared. I need to know this for my own clients, because if I don't understand their view and their position, I can't basically set forth a defense. Or and if we look at this year, and let me just speak to what we did for our clients. We filed a lawsuit first against the Sydney Consulate and KCC and the Department of State, because Sydney has done zero interviews based on a irrational reason that they're moving. And then we have a group lawsuit that kind of is connected, related, based on really two issues, right? We have KCC falling asleep at the switch and doing things that are contrary to the regulations, and causing a massive backlog and delay. And we have this kind of, once it's handed off to certain consulates, at the micro level, they're not really processing. They're withholding action on people who are current and not current. And what it really does, and I know a lot of the audience gets stuck on my number, current, visa bulletin. It really is not going to matter much unless they get to the business of business right now. Like they cannot wait anymore, or they're never going to get to a number. And the numbers better than anyone. But right now, I know it's accelerated even after we filed our lawsuit, and that's great. I don't want to take responsibility for that, but maybe it is. But I also think that they're so far behind that they're not even going to get to the Trump number from 2020 or the number or the tier 4 number from last year.
Yeah, I've been running those numbers a little bit. I take two. I take two numbers as being important. Actually, just indulge me for a minute. I would normally want you to talk, not me, but if you can just indulge me for a second here. This one. Okay. So there's two numbers I consider important. The position just before the last visa bulletin. We've got from the number which was issued on the 12th of January, right? And at that point, they had 2,682 interviews, either scheduled or already heard. That was the position, really, to include all the interviews up until the end of February. And then now we can see the difference with everything included up until the end of March, right? Which is 4,913. So there's a difference of 2,200 2NLs which have been sent out in this month, and they're all March interviews, right? And that is the March 2NLs. There's a better way of getting the 2NLs. Arthisius will provide this in his data, but it's about 2,200 cases. Now, I had said I was fully expecting, with the statements about front loading, etc., I was expecting KCC to schedule around about 3,000 visas, hoping for 2,500 to 3,000, in that range. They've undershot. Now, if they only issue now, or if they issue 2NLs of 2,200 a month, let's say, for the rest of the year, for the remaining 6 months, they'll be able to get about 3,500 issuances a month at most, right? This is assuming a fair wind and things going well. So 3,500 times times the 6 months left would be 21,000. Plus, from the 2NLs up until the end of March, we should get another 8,000 or so, maybe 7,500. So it's clear they don't want to issue more than 30,000 at most, and that's me being optimistic. And that doesn't take into account Gomez issuances or Go and Good Luck issuances, which is around about 10,000 minimum that they should be doing in 2022. Doesn't take that into account. So if everything were to be lovely, they're shooting for at most 30,000 visas at most. And I think that's being optimistic.
Simon, I told you, this is a theory that I shared with the legal team in Gomez the other day and my colleagues at Was and Banas, that I believe they've come up on, and we're going to file a FOIA about this. I think they have a 21,000 number in mind because I think that they think that cures them from any judge telling them that's not good enough.
I think you're right. And
they made the decision in November. They made the decision in November of 2021 based on the evidence that I have, because they decided that they gave too much priority to DVs last year, and they had to make up for it for the non-immigrant B1, B2 tourists, because they bring in a ton of money to the United States. And not only that, then they had to do a better job for family, immediate relative visa processing. And that's why, and then of course some student visas. And that's why, people are well aware, that student visa numbers, especially like in India,
Mumbai, 120,000. They can do 120,000 student visas in a month,
But this is the dangerous position, though. It stems from this now kind of ingrained idea that's false, which is it's a zero-sum game. So that we have to divide, and then we pit immigrant groups against each other. And so if we can make family-based immigrant or employment-based hate diversity, or like kind of have this pointing fingers. It's the same thing with consulates in the KCC, right? It's not our fault; it's the consulate's fault, right. Or there's civil strife. One of the things I want to say, because I know people, hail from all over the world, and they live in the midst of, whether it's kind of unrest, the pandemic, other things. It's amazing to listen to the State Department say these things always happen, and yet in the next sentence of a declaration to a court say, and yet we can't do anything. It's such a surprise they caught us flat-footed. We can't bob and weave, and we know that's not true. They can.
Yeah,
you can.
It's crazy. It's absolute madness. The website Save Diversity Visa is going to publish some data tomorrow based on the issuances. And I've looked at this data. They've made this available before to me, and I've shown it before, but I think they're publishing it tomorrow. Basically, it takes all the monthly issuance statistics since 2017 and plots them out, showing that, and you can sort of use some switches and filters to turn on, for example, immigrant case processing versus non-immigrant or all immigrant categories, and then show like DV and that sort of thing. And I was going through some embassies the other day, and not only are they back to what they were doing pre-pandemic in 2018 in terms of immigrant visa categories, they're exceeding immigrant visa categories. Yeah. They are trying to get up with the backlog. Okay, great. You're trying to get up with the backlog. But what they've done is they've taken in some embassies. I was looking at Riyadh, for example. In those embassies, the average number of immigrant visas a month was around about 100 a month. They've gone to 150 a month in immigrant visas, and they're doing nothing on DV. It's okay, that's nuts. You've got to do the 100 they were doing was more than half DV in 2018.
Well, I think their response now, they've now settled on the position of that's exactly right. That's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah,
and so they've institutionalized diversity visas as lower tier, and they would say we didn't even have to do. Oh, silly us for coming up with a tiered prioritization scheme. It was there all along. And so when they rescinded it, they just incorporated it into kind of the business. Like it's part of the business now. So it doesn't have to be public. It is what it is. It was always there.
Yeah, exactly. And now, of course, assuming that the Gomez and Go and Good Luck appeals are won by our side, they get to point the finger at that as well to an extent, by saying that's also reason that we can't do, it maybe even the 21,000 number you have in mind, or the, call it 25 or call it 30,000. Maybe even that number gets threatened by, the work that they'll be forced to do in 2020 and 2021 cases. So, it's a sorry state of affairs. I have to say it's really shocking in a way. Very annoying. You got any other points you wanted to raise? Or should we take some questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it too. I just wanted to make kind of a general statement that, we've seen, I mean, you get it all the time about, the anxiety of what can I do? Can I play games? Can I not play games, but can I email the KCC and trigger a response? Or they did this for someone and I didn't get the same action. My number's lower. And should I unlock? And should I do this? And should I do that? And I really just hope that those listening know that, number one, there is no consistent, like straight line. It's not a conveyor belt. Like, things happen differently. Your circumstances do play a role in how they process, right? You know better than anyone. And I also think that this notion that you can somehow get them to move your case to a consulate or get an interview is just unfortunately not the case.
You're 100% right. It used to be accurate. It used to be predictable. I could tell people, do this and you will, this will happen. And, when your number becomes current, you will get an interview about, you'll get a 2NL 2 weeks later. I used to be able to do that up until 2017, certainly 2018. No problem, because it was predictable. But I saw someone ask a question, and this is very much on your point, in one of the channels, and they were asking, can you tell me the precise steps I need to take in order to get them to do this? And, I want to scream at the screen saying, look, dude, there is no precise set of steps. If we could tell you, do these, 1, 2, 3, we would tell you that. But they're not being consistent. People are thinking, oh, the date of DS submission is everything. It's not, because there are plenty of people who submitted in May and June. They send emails to KCC, and KCC respond with, oh, yeah, it'll just be a few more weeks. It'll just be a few more weeks. What's the bloody difference between that case and, these other cases that you have been able to figure out since May and June of last year? There's no difference, right? In many cases, sometimes at the very same embassies that they're scheduling cases at. It's driving me bananas.
I do want to say, though, it's kind of contrary to my nature, but, I feel like I'm being negative.
Yeah,
and I don't want to say that, because if you read the article that we had in Forbes for our firm and the quotes that we had and the reasons we were bringing the lawsuit is really it was really hopeful. I mean, yeah, we have to sue you, but because you're not doing your job, that's okay. Yeah. But let's work together on this, and I don't want to say there's no chance. I do believe there's a chance. I think it would absolutely be something that, if we sat around a table and found a way, and we took a look at the data, because we know they're going to do about 1 million visas this year.
Yeah. They're doing well.
We're asking for a little bit of help. And I know there are problems at consulates, but we can fix that. And it's really about a willingness. And so I'm not saying that hope is not lost. We did this for a reason. And I also want to take another minute or so to address this heightened sense of, well, that judge is a Republican, that judge is a Democrat, and then so that somehow matters. I want to take a step back. I've argued before Justice Gorsuch who's a Supreme Court justice, very conservative. Okay, I had the pleasure. I've also argued against, well, not against, but even though she did rule against me, Sonia Sotomayor, who's also a Supreme Court justice. And so I've been before both of them. And I can tell you, if I had to take a DV case, yes, Judge Sotomayor would be great. But I think Judge Gorsuch would also be great. And let me explain why. Because he's not, everyone have recency bias on Trump and Trump as a Republican. Trump's really not a traditional Republican. A traditional Republican or conservative takes a look at the law, takes a look at the administrative agencies that have to execute the law, and asks whether they're doing their job. And they take a plain look at the statute, and they would say, the statute says this, you're not doing that, you're wrong. And I think we're caught up in this notion that all Republicans are anti-immigrant. They're not. They were first anti-government, meaning if the government's taking taxpayer dollars and not doing what they're supposed to be doing, I will stop that. And it's also about and Justice Gorsuch told me this personally when I argued for the government the other way, that I'm not going to let anyone tell me that I cannot order the government to do its job, especially the administrative state, meaning. And so when we look at this, when we look at Gomez, or we look at this year's cases, I think we have to understand that judges don't always, are not, I guess, toys that, you just set up and this is what they do and they only do one thing. They're people and they have a view, and it may be a bias, but that bias is not necessarily anti-immigrant. It's right. Sometimes it's true to the statute and true to the law. And here we really have an agency that's gone rogue on us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, it's indefensible. Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you for making that point. I think that's absolutely right. Okay, let's answer some questions here. Ram is asking, are there any examples from the past where the judge's decisions or verdicts were cancelled by a higher court?
Oh, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I don't know how many examples you want to do, but I spent 15 years arguing all appellate cases across the country, and you could do a search. I've won some and I lost a lot of them. So, yes, that happens. The standard is high, but if the judge were to make an error of law, or some type of wrongness to it, there has to be an error identified. I don't see an error in Judge Mehta's decision, but of course, it also raises an important point of, again, kind of this balancing between this is what happened in 2021 and this is the current lawsuit we're faced with. If we didn't have the reservation issue, this would not be case on appeal. And this is the reason why our clients, I felt, would be in the best position to raise the claim when their harm was most there, which I thought was February, so that we had a sufficient time and not to play with this reservation issue. Reservation is a legal issue that is probably going to go to the Supreme Court, because it's difficult for the agency to accept that it has to do things after the deadline. Yeah, and the deadlines don't mean anything; they can be challenged. But the 10,000 or 12,000 people who have the visas and are in the United States, they don't care, right? And if I can do that for the clients, so the clients for this year, when I look at it, I'm like, once you get your interview and your visa, it's over for you, right? And I just need to win the day for every single one of my clients. Yeah, exactly. And not reserve. I'm going to quickly address this next question about is the fact that Europe is getting more visas than Africa, is that racism? I want to address that because to make a charge of racism against a group of people or an individual is a pretty serious charge, right? I don't like throwing around that charge, particularly when it's not backed up by the evidence. The evidence says they're doing tons of interviews for people of all races, nationalities, and religions, etc., in Africa as well. They're doing tons of immigrant applications and non-immigrant applications, but they're not doing DV. And specifically, they're not doing DV at Cairo Embassy in Sudan and a couple of other very, very critical high volume embassies. So the fact that the argument that it's racism falls apart as soon as you can point to other work they're doing for those countries, and it means that we don't take on the real issue, which is that certain high volume embassies, particularly in Africa, which represent a high proportion of the overall number of selectees in Africa, are not doing their job. There are 4 embassies which account for about half of all of the selectees in Africa, and they're all those embassies, the 4 I'm talking about, they're all closed, right? So there's half of the African selectees cannot be interviewed right now, because embassies like Sudan and Cairo are just not doing anything. Sudan, perhaps understandable. Cairo, not at all understandable.
So so no, it's not racism. Let's not cry wolf about racism when it's clearly something else. Let's address the real problem, and that's, I think, what Jesse is trying to do with the macro and micro issues in DV.
Right. There is, I put it in the chat, there is a protection against discrimination in the issuance of visas based on a certain number of protected grounds. What I see at the moment is really, it's not discrimination. It's discrimination against diversity visa applicants worldwide.
Yeah.
Because when you read Sarah Craig, who's the managing director of the Visa Consular Services, put in a statement that the only basis diversity visas have a shot is because they won a free lottery, and they have no relationship to the United States. I mean, when you read stuff like that, that tells me all I need to know about how they feel at the agency level about Congress's decision to institute a diversity visa program. And that's where we have a problem. Congress fully supported this program, and until a couple years ago, they had an agency that executed it, and now they have an agency that is just unwilling to play the game again. Yep. I mean, they just won't. They're just having a negative view of it.
Yeah, and they've increased staffing at KCC by about 40% since last July. They've put statements out about front loading. Right, they're spending $500,000 on the system changes they need to do the DV 2020 and 2021. There's just no, there's no, the budgets they're asking for, and the public statements don't tally with what's actually going on. It needs to be sorted out.
Well, and I don't want to sit here and just beat up on kind of the micro issues that we have in, whether it's Ethiopia, Kathmandu, Abu Dhabi, Ankara, Yerevan, there are issues, Ukraine, Georgia, there are issues. But again, even the State Department admits the Foreign Service, that's their job. We've done this. I mean, this is the United States. If we can have a Super Bowl with 75,000 people, we can get interviews at 6,000 a month. And we can move people. I mean, listen, I would say, based on, again, everyone out there is probably, would raise their hand. If I told you had to get to an interview 1,000 miles away, I'm sure you get there, And so it's about, we want it, and we need someone to play with us. We need someone to understand the significance of this program.
Yeah, exactly. There's a question there on screen there. If KCC has the ability to process all the plaintiffs on your lawsuit in a week or two, would they do that to avoid the lawsuit? How do you feel about that now?
I think they would understand that there's probably more lawsuits coming. But I mean, if they wanted to not only process my clients but grant them interviews, I would walk away, because I live and die for my clients, and I would have nothing else. I could call my congressman and complain, or I could join Simon for some more coffee chats. But we represent a limited number of plaintiffs because we feel that they need an interview. And so I can't take an issue that I don't have a client with an active claim on. So at this point, I don't know. They may do that. I think what they would like to do, and it's kind of what I proposed, they're so hateful and spiteful because of all the litigation, that one of the things I proposed to them was to get them to stop the litigation, work together, end it. And that was, that's pretty much full front and center in the Forbes article. And, we've also made contact with the White House. I personally, through a contact I have there. And I've said, listen, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, I could solve a lot of your problems, and because the other thing to know is this, and we put it in our complaint, but when President Biden ran for office, he specifically mentioned how important the diversity visa program was. And then when he repealed Trump's immigrant visa ban, he specifically mentioned the loss opportunity for DV 2020 applicants in that proclamation. It's right there. And so how do you have his delegates at the State Department being, so unwilling to accommodate their boss? It's really tough. I've called it willful blindness, which means they're just turning a blind eye, turning the cheek away from what they're doing. And it's an agency problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Samuel, I'd like you to post this question with a bit more detail on my blog at britsimonsays.com. It's probably going to be forgivable in your case, but I'd like to just sort of deal with that in detail. It's a contradiction. I think this is a point here that you just made. The contradiction between Joe Biden's willingness, for example, or desire to increase the number of visas. Chuck Schumer asked a question the other day, directly went to, we want to increase the number to 80K, without really understanding what's going on on the ground floor, as it were. It's crazy.
Well, let me kind of, I think people may start to tag me as a diversity visa litigation attorney. I'm an immigration attorney, so I do a lot of different cases against many agencies involved in the immigration process and system, right? So, it strikes me, we have when Biden came to office, of course there was a problem. There were many lawsuits, there were many issues, right? And at USCIS, there's a tremendous backlog for those visa petitions that have to be handled and interviewed in the United States, right? And then there are border issues. And what Joe Biden did when he became president is he acknowledged them and he promised he would fix them. And what happened was, whether it was at the border with asylum and some of the things there, the actions of those he chose to work for him have not lived up to his words. And for one reason or another, he has not said another thing about immigration and taken issues. And so what we have is, we also had the director of USCIS this week, or Jadu, who by all accounts is a wonderful person, say, like, listen, these processing delays at our agency are not good. They're not only not good, they're unreasonable. And we've litigated an amazing amount of cases because people cannot simply get to their job. And that's no different at the KCC.
Yeah. Okay, let's do some quick ones here. So Mitchell's asking about the status at Sydney. I tried to jump on the lawsuit, but he was a bit late. It's a mess at Sydney, right? I mean, they've got this stupid moving thing. They've got, a moving/COVID excuse for why they're not working. They haven't moved DV cases to Melbourne. It's not easy or practical, frankly, to move all the cases to other consulates, and other consulates are not behaving well either, right? So your lawsuit against Sydney, is it closed, by the way? Could Mitchell join that or not?
It's closed now because we filed the complaint. I did put in the chat, there may be an opportunity. We will likely amend our complaint to add more data, more facts. It won't slow us down. When we do that, we can often add people. So if you're interested, we've had a sign-on page that's active, and we'll contact you if that opportunity arises. It's funny, Anthony Blinken's actually in Australia, in the area this week, I believe. Not that he will do anything. But I think the Sydney, listen, we have a client whose number is 20. Legit. Like, that's the lowest number I think I've seen anywhere that hasn't had any processing. So, right. Again, I do not expect Sydney to remain obstinate. And I think our lawsuit will likely trigger. We've seen some type of raindrops with a client who's based in Sydney. I don't know what they'll do. There's not a lot, they could make this go away so easily.
It's so easy. Exactly.
It's almost, now they could dig in their heels too. And if we do that, Mitchell, for you specifically, you may want to join us, because I don't care who the judge is. I don't care. They're not going to let that happen. They're not going to let it happen.
It's crazy. Okay, so so there you go, Mitchell. Look, so you just put something in the chat, did you?
Yeah, that's our sign-on page. I mean, it doesn't cost any money to sign on. It's just for those who are interested and may have been a bit late to our lawsuit and are interested. Sign on.
Cool. Deepak's asking about good luck. So all the 2020 and 2021 lawsuits are being appealed right now. No news on the appeals on 2020 and 2021 yet, right? No date.
Our stay order, the government has, they're being, I want to say disrespectful. So they've said to the Judge Mehta, if you don't rule on our stay motion by February 15th, we're just going to take it up. Well, and they owe us until February 15th time to respond. And so nothing is stayed now, but they have also said previously, we would not issue any visa for 2020 and 2022 till April at the earliest. And so right now they should, because they don't have a stay, they should be implementing the order, but they would never get to an interview until April for us anyway.
Yeah. The reason for the April thing they've said is because of the system improvements they made. They started the system improvements allegedly on October 15th or 17th or something. Mm-hmm. And they said I read the breakdown of the number of hours, 320 hours this and 96 hours that, whatever. It was kind of laughable. The whole thing was a bit laughable, but basically in software, we work with things called agile teams. So a small agile team of about 5 or 6 people plus a couple of testers or whatever would knock that piece of work out by their estimates, certainly in 3 months, perhaps 4. And so by the time they actually get into the court arguing that they can't do 2020 and 2021, their technical work should largely be done. They should be in testing. And so they should therefore be able to do the April timeline, no problem at all. I mean, obviously, I don't have a lot of patience for the techies at Department of State, but they should be able to do it,
Well, I think too, so this is the most frustrating part of it for a lawyer, I think, for me. And then I think the judge is going to have a really tough time staying calm about their claim that, well, we spent $500,000, but we would be irreparably harmed, meaning we would suffer and the public would, if we actually had to use it. Well, you've already spent the money. So you can't, it doesn't make sense. I could get my 11-year-old son to know that doesn't make sense, right? You don't have to be talented to understand that.
The harm is to do with the fiscal year boundary. The irreparable harm they're saying they'd be caused is by being told that they have to do something they don't want to do. That's the irreparable harm, is bananas. Okay, so 25XXX, this is someone who's very close to the highest number in EU. We've gone back and forth, you and I, Jesse, about what will happen with the visa bulletin. I still don't know. Mathematically, that number is at risk anyway. But that doesn't mean that they won't take the pressure and increase the numbers as you suggested, or that they won't keep the numbers low based on the math or even based on suppressing the overall activity deliberately.
So what I've, I know we've people have the view that, well, if I'm not current, I can't sue. I don't subscribe to that point of view. I would argue that if your number is high or near the cutoff of what it would be historically done, and we imagine ourselves on a boat together, every day people are walking the plank and being thrown overboard. And if you have a higher number, that's probably you. And if you don't get and press your rights, because that's what a lawsuit does, it allows you to press your rights, and you wait, you're likely to be overboard at that point. You're not going to have the harm to you happened already. If you have a high number, the harm to you took place in December, January, February, and March, because they're probably going to knock out those who have and who always possessed good numbers. It's those other ones. If we are at a 21,000 issuance rate, your day is over. Like now.
Yeah. I think that's probably, people are probably not understanding that point, that if the government have in mind to only issue 21, let's say some number between 20 and 30,000, right? And based on evidence, that's the most, 30,000 is the very most with nothing else going on, and 20,000 is more realistic. In that case, based on the way they behaved in the last visa bulletin, they don't have to increase the numbers very much at all from where we're at now, right? Because issuing 21,000 means something like 8,000 for Europe, 9,000 for Africa. It's low numbers, right? They don't need to have many selectees be current, and it's going to be tough.
And they shouldn't do this, and you know this, but if they made the world current in June, that doesn't mean that they're not going to go by number, by order.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So like they could do that, and everyone would make feel good.
Yeah.
But what they're gonna do, you're still overboard. Like you were harmed yesterday.
Yeah.
You're trying to swim to the United States. You're not gonna make it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And that's the reason when I look at the state of affairs, and everyone wanted to, maybe, ask me why now. We can wait. We should wait. You drowned at that point. You're not, because the other thing that people need to understand is, and we've been so caught up that in the sense that, well, we can just file a lawsuit and get an order in 20 days. Yeah, if you file for a preliminary injunction, but number one, your standard's much higher. And number two, we start getting into the reservation game. And that's not a game, as we all know from 2020 and 21, that you as a client or you as an applicant want to be in, because there's people right now who are waiting in their home country who are in the reservation pile saying, I don't know if that's going to happen. Whereas if you get an interview and a decision from a judge prior to the fiscal deadline and get an interview and get a visa, as we had in Gomez, they're in New York right now, living their best life.
Right, exactly. Okay, question here about whether you'll publish all documents, just like Curtis does.
We don't do that. We do that for, number one, we want to respect the privacy of our clients. That's incredibly important for me, especially. I appreciate that other lawyers have different ways of doing it, but for us and our clients, unless my clients were to allow me to do that, that's not my decision to make. It's theirs, and their privacy is at top of mind at all times. And so I can't do that unless I'm authorized to do it.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, this question comes up quite a bit, and I think the deadlines for this are probably sort of coming up soon. So this is someone who's obviously, again, 25,000. I'm not sure if it was the same gentleman as before, but he's suggesting now coming in and doing AOS. So do you subscribe to the view, Jesse, that someone coming in on any non-immigrant visa would have to wait 60 days to file for their I-485? Would that...
If we can. Yeah, I mean, it certainly takes, it's not a... Everyone talks about that rule, and it's really a presumption. It's a presumption. And so I think you have to, number one, get a representative to walk you through what you need and what you can do. But if it was, put it this way, by all accounts, officers, interviewers at USCIS, you can bring an attorney to your interview. That helps. And number two, they generally act far more favorable to someone in your situation, diversity visa applicants, in my view. And they're more willing to maybe cut you a break.
Agreed.
Now, you're going to have a tough time, because when you're current,
Yeah, that's the thing. It's going to be, if
Yeah.
it gets current, that number is going to be the last minute. It's going to be September, August at most. Now, I have
Well,
seen people file in September and still finish the case because of the point you just made.
I
The
think
FOs are fast on DV.
I do want to make one other point though, because let's take the worst case scenario. If they find that you had immigrant intent, they may also revoke your B1, B2, and so you may not be able to travel back to the United States on a tourist visa again.
Yeah.
And it can create trouble in the future. So you just want to be careful. I don't. It's not. I know we're all talking about DV 2022, but your immigration history may be broader than that. You may have an employment opportunity, or you may want to just travel here. So you just got to be careful about that misrepresentation about intent.
Yeah. So, bottom line for adjustment of status, Dan, for you, your number is going to be, very delayed. So just hold fire on that idea. But if you were to try and do adjustment of status with this sort of with this situation with a non-immigrant visa, whilst I normally recommend that people don't need a lawyer for adjustment of status, if you're going to do that, if you're going to come in, with an intention, frankly, to adjust, then you need to have a plan worked out with a lawyer, and you need to have a lawyer representing you in that particular scenario, in my opinion.
It's also important where you're going to live, because USCIS has offices in different cities that are busier than others. If you try to go to maybe LA, actually, it's not a bad office, but it's busy.
Yeah, exactly. They're normally pretty good. They normally rush cases through, and you would find out the last visa bulletin of this year for September interviews is going to be published in mid-July. So you can file at that moment if your number became current 25,000, you could put your plan into operation in mid-July, right? So now you might know earlier, but in my view, it's probably going to be the last month of the year. Okay, so Jesse, let's have this one. U.S. Embassy, Dakar. So is there nothing we can do because they clearly said they're in the prioritization scheme? I can prove it with an email that they sent to me. Do you want emails like that say, yeah, we are operating a prioritization?
Oh, I mean, sure, but I don't need. Listen, I have no reason to disagree with you. I know it's true. They've admitted it. They think they're compelled to have a prioritization scheme now. I want people to take that message home today. That is one of the new pieces of data. I mean, our clients always hear me say, like, I can't give you guesses. I have to look at the data which comes in, and that'll shape my view that day, right? Mm-hmm. And so the data that has come in since maybe we had coffee last, or that I filed a lawsuit, is they absolutely 100% believe that they are ordered by law to have a prioritization scheme. So for you, sir, in your current situation in Dakar, I absolutely believe that you have that email. I'd be happy to represent you and defend you in a court, because otherwise, people are going to say, I can't believe it. I can't believe they never got to me. I really hope that we can prevail and change their mindset, because it's legally wrong.
Right. It's nuts.
And morally, but that's a different issue.
Right. So I've heard Chuck Cook say many times, I'm not Las Vegas odds maker. Would you like to comment on the odds that the government obtains stays for the appeals? How likely do you think that is?
I mean, I think it's less than 5% that Judge Mehta will take it up and stay at that level. I don't think the government would say that they feel that way. I think the appellate court is, your chances are going to go up, but I think they're still low. And I think the real game will be if they want to press it to the Supreme Court and get a stay there. It's probably, an even shot. And I think that's really on the reservation issue. That's a really interesting, novel issue. To be honest, I think they could possibly get a stay, because, the best point the government makes is this. And it also proves the point for my clients why we filed now. The best point they make, and it's a point I've made, is this: once we issue a visa, it's over. There's nothing we can do about it. They know it. We know it. So I think the Supreme Court may look at it and say, yikes, maybe we do have to think this. And it will ultimately come down to whether they think judges have the authority to order the government to do something past a deadline. Now, let me give you my view just quickly on the difficulty that I would put the government in on their issue, specifically for diversity visas, because I think it's a unique issue for diversity visas specifically. If we have a hard fiscal deadline and the State Department goes rogue, meaning they don't do their job, and a judge cannot reserve visas, well, what can we do to stop this agency run amok? There must be something a Article 3, meaning a judge, a federal judge, has to do. And if he orders you prior to the end of the year to correct the legal wrongs you committed, it cannot be that a lawsuit is too early, and then it cannot be that it's too late, right?
Right.
So there has to be a check. There has to be a check to put on the State Department when it behaves unlawfully. And I think ultimately, going back to my putting on my Gorsuch hat, that would be the way we could win on appeal. But I'm not an odds maker, and I'm often wrong and often in doubt. So I don't think a stay is coming February 15th from Judge Mehta, though. I don't, because I have 3 orders in Gomez that are published that have disagreed with the government and told them to stop making the same arguments.
Right, exactly. Okay, so Ram had a question here. Yeah, what's the difference in logic? Ram, the difference in logic, the difference of opinions on the visa bulletin. I think I'd like to address that in another video. It's a long subject. If you want me to type it out, I will do if you ask me a question on britsimonsays.com. But I'll also try and address that in another video. But very simply put, I look at it from the point of view of understanding what they're supposed to do with the visa bulletin, what they're supposed to do in terms of controlling the process. And I assume, shall we say, I kind of simplistically assume that they should follow that process. But the reason I don't predict what they're going to do with the visa bulletin is because I'm aware that they're not following their own rules. And the reason that Jesse is sort of taking that same view as well, that we don't know what they're going to do with the visa bulletin, is that he understands they don't follow their own rules, and he also thinks that they're going to try and look good in front of the judge. Very, very simplistically, that's kind of the difference explained. Mathematically and logically, they should not go current, and but that's not to say they won't, which is why I won't say predictions. It's just too much going on. Okay, let's just take a couple more questions. We're almost an hour, so Ram's got loads of questions here this morning. What's the difference between lawyer, attorney, and litigator?
I mean, listen, there are a lot. So
sounds like a joke.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, they all walk into a bar. No, yeah. The difference is a litigation attorney is someone who specializes in appearing before court and a judge. And there are a lot of lawyers who maybe you'd hire to do your home, or if you're a business owner, to sell your business, or maybe to do your taxes, a tax attorney who would never go to court. They never go to court. Litigation is where you sue in a court of law. Okay. And the difference between a lawyer and an attorney is not is just a different term. So that's really the difference. Is litigation is a specific type of lawyer.
Right. Cool. Okay. You said you put something in the chat about joining the lawsuit. I want to make sure that's there. I couldn't see it. I was scanning through. I couldn't see it.
I put it. Oh, you know what? I put it in the private chat. I should.
Okay. Let me take it from that, and I'll just post it in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So comments. Right. So for a couple of people that have asked about joining the lawsuit, I'm just putting that in the chat there. Yeah. So check the chat now. There is a link there for people that want to contact Jesse and register their interest in joining either adding on to the lawsuits, etc.
And if it were to happen, it would probably happen in the next 2 to 4 weeks. That's when we have that window of time. We, again, it all we want to make sure we can help as many people as possible. We have a limited number that we would be willing to take on. The other thing is we can't really do harm to the current cases, and we wouldn't do that. But I also want to address, because I know a lot of people are now, I've called it, we're getting to a little bit of a crunch time here. And there are people who I don't want anyone out there to feel like they need to join a lawsuit. What a lawsuit does is, and I've said this before, is can it help you? Can it improve your position? It will absolutely improve your position if you sign on with someone who you trust and who is willing to do work for you. You can't go backwards, right? Like they're not going to, and by joining a lawsuit, another thing we commonly hear and we've talked about before, they're not going to take negative action against you. They're not going to certainly put you on the bad list or anything. That being said, if you've done something to jeopardize your eligibility, a lawsuit is not going to get you out of that heap of trouble.
Right.
So if you've done something on a 260 that's not true or accurate that you can't correct, I'm not going to be able to get you away and make you eligible, right? I use the axe murderer analogy. Like if you're an axe murderer and you won the diversity visa lottery, I can't help you with that, right? You're done. So.
But you wouldn't want to upset anyone like that.
No. Well, it's your eligibility is there.
Yeah. Quick question here. I've seen a few people have experienced this, Kabul and Baghdad. So there is a very specific subject line that needs to be put in the subject line when you're asking for a reassignment from one of those embassies. And but still, there are people who have followed that method. They've put that exact subject line in. It's important. It's precise, Helene. But still, they're being ignored. They're not being reassigned to other embassies. Any advice for those people? Is there anything they can do? Just keep trying, I guess. Or
I guess really keep trying. You could also reach out to Curtis, who is really responsible for making that happen with the mass reassignments. He's did exceptional work on that case and caused that policy movement. So maybe reach out. But yeah, you just have to make sure you have the instructions followed and do it. And again, I think a lot of people see this and it speaks to the anxiety that exists for all applicants, which is they expect service and customer service and a response. And when they don't get it, they feel like this was just happening to me. It's massive. It's across the board. It's not you specifically. And as much as it's not going to go away overnight, don't take it personally. It's not something you've done. It's not something in your 260. It's not because you messed up an initial in your middle name. It's not personal.
Yeah, understood. Good. Okay, so couple of other comments here. I'm just seeing if there's anything else we can clean up here. I just put in the chat there the Curtis Morrison's link, as you mentioned his name. So for people in that Kabul, Africa, and Baghdad situation, you might want to contact Curtis. And yeah, this is heartbreaking. Why Africa so few? Don't they want us in America? It's heartbreaking that. And people in Nepal will be saying the same thing, and all over the world. It's not about not wanting you. I've given up trying to understand or explain the lack of effort from the government on this. But it's not the majority of the people don't want you. That's not.
And let me offer an opinion more than anything else. And so when you have everyone would expect that every consulate would have talented, hardworking people. And it would be the same in London as it is in Ankara, as it is in Addis, right? Well, let me tell you, that's not true. Some consulates, like Johannesburg, right? It's commonly known as kind of a difficult consulate, and for some reason, right? And so I there seems to be many consulates in the Africa region that lack a willingness to help and lack the talent to actually get on with its processing of scheduling interviews. They're just slower for some reason. I don't understand it. And I can't make heads or tails of it. The only thing you can do, and this is where litigation actually, just to show you kind of where I come from the world, litigation makes the government tell you what it's doing, and good or bad, right? And if I'm wrong, there's evidence of it somewhere, right? Meaning that, hey, it really is this war that's causing us. We don't have staff there. And so they owe us the evidence. But I don't think the data speaks for itself on how egregious it is. But again, our lawsuit and many others, are trying to do what we can to fix it.
Yeah. Indeed. Okay. Well, we're at about an hour, so thank you, Jesse, for talking through these points. More power to you. I hope everything goes well with the lawsuits, and we can get this fixed.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. When is that next visa bulletin expected to drop?
It might be in the latter part of this week coming, but more likely it'll be the early part of the following week. Okay. When that happens, they'll switch from scheduling March to scheduling April. And so there's a few days left where we might get a few additional visa interviews set up for March. But generally speaking, March is sort of over with. We might just get a few more in the first part of next week. And there was everyone was up in arms about that we're halfway through thing. It was halfway through the scheduling. That is correct. They are halfway through the scheduling. When they've scheduled March, that's it. They've done 6 months worth of scheduling, and where they're at, they'll maybe hit 10,000 people being adjudicated by the March point. Maybe. I don't think they're going to do that quite. But that doesn't mean we're going to get 10,000 visas. That's just people, having interviews. And roughly speaking, about 10 to 15% will either be refused or no-shows. Probably more like 15% will be refused at the moment because of the lack of document processing. So the dropout rate could be quite high.
Well, I will say, one of the things that this pilot program, it struck me, and it's maybe I don't know if I would expect the refusal rate, because refusal is just admin processing, meaning it could be anything from they think you're a suspected bad guy to you didn't have your medicals in order or you're missing your high school diploma or whatever. So you have to be refused. They only have two buttons. It's either issuance or refused. And administrative processing is the same thing. They just have to call it refused. I would expect the number of refusals to go way, way up, like on a magnitude of maybe 2 times because of the new pilot program. Now, will they interview more knowing that the refusal rate is high? I don't know. That's an interesting question. We're going to have to see where the data takes us on that. Yeah. But I've told everyone, especially our clients, do not walk into your interview without checking and making sure you have all your ducks in a row, meaning you have all the paperwork. Prepare now. And that's the one thing the audience or whoever's out there can take control of, because we can't control what KCC does, and we certainly can't control what consular officers are doing. But you can act as though you're having your interview in 2 months. And you should do that. You should do it.
Yeah.
Get your
so you're absolutely right. Couple of things just to build on that. You're right saying the refusals will be higher. I agree with you. They didn't used to be double what they are now since the document procedure was introduced, but still they're going to be higher. There'll also be more no-shows. That's people that are scheduled for interview but don't turn up because they've given up on their case because they actually can't get the documents together. Those people would have been held back by the document procedure, but under the pilot program, they'll be scheduled kind of blindly. They'll just be scheduled. So we'll be wasting interviews. One other important thing that maybe people don't understand. When you're scheduled for an interview, a visa is allocated to your case. So let's say you're scheduled for March. A visa is allocated to your case. It must be processed during March. If you were scheduled for March, it has to be processed in March. At the end of the month, the embassy has to send back the unused visas, or they can do some reallocation within the embassy themselves, but they have to send them back. And what that means is, if you go into an interview unprepared, and you need more time to get documentation after the interview, and you slip therefore to and the next month, your allocated visa is taken away from you, and it has to be reapplied for later on, which means you have to the embassy have to, let's say you switch to April, you're ready by April, you got all your documents, but the visa can't just be automatically issued to you. They have to actually go back to KCC, and we know how KCC are doing things, right? And KCC have to reallocate another visa for you, which is not a great position to put yourself into, right? So as Jesse just said, for goodness sake, go to the interview properly prepared, including documents you think you don't need, like an I-134, because you've heard from your brother's uncle's sister that you don't need an I-134 in whatever embassy. Just take all the bloody documents with you that you think you might possibly need, so that you're properly prepared, and have them nicely organized in the interview.
And the other thing I'll say, because I know this constantly comes up on the chats, is, I think this may be a problem. If you think you have a problem, don't walk into the interview, and kind of shock the officer in front of you. Reach out to the consulate beforehand if you can. Send them an email, and say, listen, I just want to make you aware of this one issue, and then affirmatively address it honestly. Because if you do that, your chances of being issued a visa are way up.
Yeah,
way up.
Exactly. Yeah.
They'll forgive a lot because they can.
Yeah, exactly. Also, the same thing. So if you've got some oddball things like a child that's aged out, and so you need to know about the CSPA, or you've used one of the strange exceptions about passports, or you've used an exception about country of eligibility, you can go to the interview prepared with the information, the guidance for the officers that says how you should be handled in that respect. Don't assume the officers know what the hell they're doing with the oddball cases. They don't know what they're doing in all cases. So you should take out, for example, the CSPA stuff if you've got a child that's aging out. You should take the chargeability exception list that's in the 9FAM, in the FAM guide. Take out those lists and show how your case matches it. If you're applying with work experience, take all of the information from ONET and so on to prove that, to the officer, here's how you're supposed to do the adjudication. And don't do it in a cheeky way, in a rude way. Just have the information there so that you can help the officer make a good decision right there and then, rather than being delayed. Right?
Totally.
Okay. I'd love to be an immigration lawyer. I think I missed my calling.
There's time left.
I don't know.
I'm gonna get you. We'll get you right here. Wasden's hiring.
I'm more interested in retiring from my day job. I don't want another day job. Thank you.
Yeah. I will say, the hardest part, I think all immigration attorneys, and I was on the government side for almost 15 years. The one thing that doesn't prepare you is that you live and die by your clients, right? I really do. I'm not in their shoes, but you certainly feel what they feel, a lot of it anyway. And it's hard. And that's why we fight. And it's, immigration attorneys get a bad rap. A lot of them do, and a lot of them bring it on themselves, unfortunately. But I think there are a lot of genuine players. I'd like to be included in that field, because nothing is better. I've shown this before, but let me see. That picture right up here at the top is from a diversity visa winner holder from Albania that sent that to me from her hometown. It's hand carved, and I put it up there for a reason. It's right above my children, and it's a reason why we do this. And I know you do it because you volunteer your time. You're right here with us.
Yeah, it's important. The people behind the stories is important. Just before we close out, I'm just gonna, I've got two people talking in the chat here. One saying, "Please answer the other one." So, Insight O'Clock is saying, "Please reply to Fatima." So, this is the question. Unfortunately, Fatima, for a start, DV interviews are handled in Mumbai, not New Delhi, right? So, not sure why you think your post is going to be there. You think the embassy is closed? Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, one thing I would say is there are some cases being handled by Mumbai at the moment. So, it seems, I don't think it's closed. But can I help with getting the interview? No. Can Jesse perhaps? Contact Jesse through that link that I put in there earlier.
Mumbai's been putting out some numbers. I don't know what their diversity visa numbers are, but they've been dropping numbers on other immigrant visa categories.
And non-immigrant. I mean,
non-immigrant. Yeah,
non-immigrant through the roof.
They have the H-1B and the Ls. A lot of talented individuals from India, obviously, who have employer sponsors.
Massive embassy. They're doing a lot of work, and they are taking some work from some of the neighboring countries, etc. on DV. So
as they should.
As they should. Absolutely, they could squeeze them in. Okay, Jesse, let's call that a day. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
All right. Be good. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Bye-bye.